Every year, hundreds of people write apology letters to a doll locked in a glass case. They swear the moment they disrespected this doll, mocked it or took its photo without its permission, their lives fell apart. Some lost their jobs, others got sick or had terrible accidents. They found that the only way to get the nightmare to stop, to get the doll to lift the curse, was to say sorry. What started life as a little boy's cherished companion is now one of the most terrifying objects in the world.
Yes, a haunted doll story. I love these.
I know you do. Personally, I find them super creepy. Anyway, this is a true story of Robert the doll, a doll that you definitely do not want to make angry. Our story takes us to Key West in Florida. It's around 1904, and at the time Key West was an isolated island, there was no bridge yet connecting it to the Florida mainland. Now, the first important character that I need to introduce you to is Robert Eugene Otto. Born on the 25th of October 1900 to Thomas and Minnie Otto, he was the youngest of 4 children. The family was really well respected in the community. You see, Thomas Otto was a doctor and druggist, and he owned 2 pharmacies on the island. Business was booming, and the Ottos enjoyed a pretty comfortable life. Things were great. They lived in this fabulous house. It was beautiful and quite the mixture of styles. It's been described as Key West, West Indian, Colonial, Victorian. Here's a picture of it so you can get an idea of what that looked like. They also employed some servants, which included a married couple called William and Emmeline Abbott. But now, back to little Robert Otto. He was a budding artist and apparently painting before he could talk. He'd soon been turning 4, and as an early birthday present, he was gifted with a pretty impressive doll, our other very important character. The doll was child-sized, standing at 3 foot tall, stuffed with wood wool and covered in felt. It had brownish blonde hair and black buttons for eyes. It's thought that this doll was a clown doll made by the Steiff Company in Germany, and that when it was gifted to Robert, it was actually dressed in a green and pink harlequin outfit, decorated with pom-poms.
Blech, the stuff of nightmares if you ask me.
Well, Robert thought otherwise. He loved that doll from the moment he set eyes on it. He loved it so much that he even gave it his own first name. He would call the doll Robert, and from then on started going by his middle name, Eugene, or Gene for short. Wherever Gene went, Robert went too. You see, Gene didn't really have any friends, so Robert became his best friend, always by his side. Gene made sure that Robert had his own special seat at the dinner table and would feed him bits of food. He would also dress Robert up in one of his own favourite sailor suits. They would play together all day long and then be tucked into bed together at night. Robert had been the perfect gift, or so Gene's parents thought, even if Gene was a little bit too attached to the doll. Soon though, strange things started to happen. Gene's parents were walking past the playroom in the house one day, and to their surprise, they heard 2 very distinct voices coming from the room. One was definitely Gene's, and the other, well, it was deeper, rougher, and unmistakably not their son's. They quickly opened the playroom door, of course concerned about who on earth Gene was talking to, but it turned out that there was no one else in the room, just Gene and the doll.
Now that's creepy.
Oh, I know. I probably would have gotten rid of that doll right there and then. Anyway, they didn't, so the strangeness continued. One night, Thomas and Minnie were woken up by screams coming from Gene's room. They rushed down to check on him, and they found Robert on top of Gene. It was almost as if the doll was holding Gene down in his bed. Another night, they heard banging and crashing sounds coming from Gene's room. When they went to check, the room was in quite a state. Things were knocked with shells and furniture had been tipped over. Poor Gene was terrified and hiding under his blanket in bed. His parents rushed over to him to find out what had happened. Gene was so scared that he could hardly get the words out. But Robert did it, he said. From then on, sometimes Thomas and Minnie would find broken plates and glasses around the house. They'd find clothes ripped up, furniture tipped over, bedding strewn across the floor, and some of Gene's other toys destroyed. Gene would always say that Robert did it, but Thomas and Minnie weren't always entirely convinced. Was it really Robert, or was it Gene just being a kid and getting up to mischief? You see, anything bad that happened, Gene would blame it on Robert. Anytime Gene did something naughty and got into trouble, it wasn't his fault, it was Robert's fault. I didn't do it, Robert did, he would say. Now, some versions of the story say that Gene's aunt wasn't particularly enamoured with the doll. She felt that there was something wrong with it, something wrong with Gene's attachment to it. So she suggested to Thomas and Minnie that they hide Robert away in the attic. They agreed, and the next day, the aunt was found unresponsive in her bed. She'd suffered a fatal stroke. Most likely a coincidence, but some people believe that Robert was to blame. Whatever the case, it wasn't long before Robert was brought back down from the attic, and Gene and the doll picked up where they left off. Sadly, there'd be another family tragedy. Thomas Otto passed away in 1916 when Gene was only 16 years old. His passing meant that finances became a bit tight for the Ottos, but Minnie would never let on that they were struggling. A few years passed, and Jean, wanting to pursue his passion for all things art, went off to uni, leaving his best friend Robert behind. First, he studied architecture at the University of Virginia, then off he went to study at the Academy of Fine Arts in Chicago, before joining the Art Student League of New York. In 1924, he moved to Paris to study the great expressionist European painters. Paris was also where he'd meet his future wife, Anne Parker. She was studying music, and Jean heard her before he saw her. He was woken up by the most beautiful piano music drifting up to him from a salon below his. He leaned over the balcony to see who was playing, and there was Anne, looking beautiful and radiant and playing the piano oh so skillfully. It was love at first sight. The two got married on the 3rd of May 1930, and once Anne finished her studies, they moved to New York. Life was pretty good for them there. Jean continued painting and did a little bit of work at a furniture store, and Anne's musical career, well, it really flourished. You see, she was a regular performer at the prestigious Rockefeller Center. The couple also composed many songs together, with Jean writing the lyrics and Anne providing the music. In 1945, though, their lives would change dramatically. Jean's mother Minnie became very ill, so Jean and Anne went to stay with her in Key West. Unfortunately, Minnie passed away in September of that year. The family estate was to be split between her 4 children, but interestingly, they all decided that they didn't want any of it, and that Jean should get it all. With Jean now the sole inheritor of his childhood home, he suggested that he and Anne move into the house permanently, that they build a new life for themselves in Key West. Anne was a little bit reluctant at first. She'd have to give up her career at the Rockefeller Center, but in the end she agreed to the move. After over 20 years apart, Jean and Robert would finally be united. Now, if you thought that at the age of 45, Jean would have grown out of his attachment to Robert, well, you'd be very, very wrong. Jean brought Robert down from the attic, where he'd been stored for all those years, and the two quickly fell back into their old ways.
No, you're not serious.
Oh, I am. Anne was, as any wife would be, confused and concerned. She knew that her husband was a bit eccentric. He was an artist after all, but this was a whole other level of weird. Jean carried Robert around the house with him, sat him at his special chair at the dining table, and at night time placed Robert on a chair near his bed. Apparently he and Anne had separate bedrooms. He made Robert a little sanctuary in the attic, kitting it out with child-sized furniture. He even made some custom outfits for Robert, one of them being a pixie costume. When Anne tried to separate the two and put Robert out of sight, Jean would get quite upset. This whole doll obsession thing was really starting to put a strain on their relationship. Jean could also be a bit cruel to Anne, not physically but emotionally, and when this was pointed out to him, he would blame Robert. Despite all of this going on in the background, Jean's art career really took off. He had his own unique style that people absolutely loved. The newspapers were singing his praises, and his art openings were attended by the creme de la creme of Key West. Jean would create his masterpieces up in the turret room of the house, because apparently that room had the best lighting. And Robert, of course, also had a part to play in his artistic process. Whilst Jean painted, he would put Robert in the window of the turret to keep him company. People walking past the house would swear that they'd see Robert moving on his own from one window to another, or turning his head. Some even said that they saw his facial expressions change as he looked out at them through the window. Jean and Robert would remain close friends right up until the very end of Jean's life. Jean would sadly pass away in 1974 after a long battle with Parkinson's disease. The Sun Sentinel reported that in the months preceding his death, as his health failed, he spent most of his time in the attic room talking to Robert. Jean left the house to Anne, but everything else, including their very valuable artwork and antique collections, to his sister. This decision was heartbreaking for Anne. Anne had given up her career for Jean, and without him, she was struggling financially. So in the end, she sold the house to her good friend, William Gazer. She also left Robert in his care, saying that that doll was Jean's best friend. Of course, he never really had any other friends. William actually thought about burning the doll, but in the end decided against it. Instead, he kept it stored in a wooden chest on the 2nd floor. William wouldn't keep the house for long. Towards the end of 1974, he sold it to his friends Myrtle Reuter and her husband. The house was then rented out quite a bit in the mid-1970s, and this is when strange things started to happen again. 2 men who were tenants there reported hearing strange noises coming from the room where Robert was stored. Sometimes they would hear the giggling of a child. Sometimes it sounded like there was someone rummaging around up there. Each time they went up to check though, nobody was there. After the 6th time this happened, they noticed something odd. Robert had moved. Neither of them took it too seriously at first. They each thought that the other was to blame, that it was just one of them playing a prank. But it started happening more and more frequently. Each time they went up to check, Robert had moved again. Sometimes Robert's legs were crossed, sometimes they weren't. His head would be turned in different directions, his arms would be in different positions. They realised that this wasn't one of them playing a prank, it wasn't just a bit of fun. Something very strange was going on. They decided that it would be good to get an outside opinion, so they invited a friend called Malcolm round to see if he noticed anything strange about the doll. As their friend entered Robert's room, he said it was as if he was entering some kind of strange force field. The men started discussing Robert's history, and when they said something not so nice about Jean, Malcolm noticed Robert's facial expression changed. He looked angry. Malcolm would say there was some kind of intelligence there. The doll was listening to us. A plumber once came to do some repair work in the house, and he ended up having to go up into the attic where Robert was. As he sat to work, his back turned towards the doll. He heard the sound of a child giggling. There was no one else up there with him, he was sure of it. He turned around, scanning the room to see where this giggling sound was coming from. And to his horror, he realised that Robert had moved all by himself. The poor plumber, scared witless, quickly grabbed his gear and ran out of the house, refusing to come back.
I don't blame him.
Me either. A man that Myrtle, the current owner of the house, let stay there one summer, apparently had quite the traumatic experience. He said that Robert locked him up in the attic. And that's not all. Apparently, Robert also gave him yellow fever. Myrtle would say that to me he was some kind of nut.
I agree with Myrtle. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
I mean, it's definitely an outlandish story, but you never know. Despite all of these stories though, Myrtle wasn't scared of Robert. She actually took quite a liking to him. At Christmas time, she dressed him up in some cute pyjamas and set him by the Christmas tree. When she moved to house in 1980, she took Robert with her and would often place him on her front porch. After a while though, her opinion of Robert would change. You see, she found that he would frequently move around the house on his own. This understandably scared her, so she decided that she'd lock Robert in a room. Robert wasn't just going to sit back and let this slide though. Oh no, he retaliated by doing the same thing to her.
I take it back. Maybe that guy wasn't actually such a nut after all.
Maybe not. This was the final straw. Myrtle needed to get rid of the doll, and quickly. In 1994, she donated Robert to the Fort East Martello Museum. I can't stand him in my house anymore, she told the museum. He's haunted, she said. Myrtle quickly filled out the necessary paperwork and went on her way, leaving Robert in the museum's care. Sadly, Myrtle would pass away just 3 months later. The staff at the museum were terrified of Robert. They kept him locked in a back room and covered up with a sheet. The public could come and see him, but only by appointment. Meanwhile, at the old Otto house, which was now a bed and breakfast, aptly called the Artist House, there was a lot of paranormal stuff going on. Doors would open and close on their own, phones would fly off their hooks, and going into the attic was definitely not a pleasant experience. People reported feeling like the room was filled with a negative energy. They'd feel a burning sensation. They'd feel like they were being watched. The window shade where Robert used to sit was often pulled to the side on its own, as if somebody was looking out the window. People would see a woman wearing a wedding dress walking down the stairs. She would also sit at the foot of guests' beds. People have speculated that this woman is the ghost of Aunt Otto. You see, 5 years after selling the house, Anne sadly lost her life to pancreatic cancer. People think that her spirit has returned to protect the guests from Robert as his presence gets stronger. Back at the museum, a change in the museum's curator and Robert's growing popularity meant that Robert was no longer hidden away in a back room. He was put on display for all to see. And with him now on display, paranormal activity started to decrease at the artist's house, but increase at the museum. Doors slammed shut on their own, lights flickered or turned on and off by themselves. People had all sorts of problems taking pictures of Robert. Camera and phone batteries drained in Robert's presence, but were fully charged again the moment the devices were taken outside of the museum. Some people would find that the pictures they took came out perfectly, except for the ones of Robert. Others found that only pictures of Robert came out okay, and in some of these pictures, all taken on the same visit, Robert was in different positions. In the late 1990s, Robert got some much needed TLC. He was painstakingly cleaned from head to toe, including his little sailor outfit. Once the job was done, he was then locked back into his display case. The next morning, the first employee to arrive at the museum that day found that the lights were already on, which was a bit strange. She looked around the room and she noticed that there were child-sized footprints in the dust on the museum floor. The strangest wasn't over yet. She heard a knocking sound and of course it was coming from Robert's case. She bravely walked over to take a look and found that Robert's feet were covered in dust, like he'd been walking around, but the case was not. She then heard Robert's trademark giggle. Now, if you're brave enough, you can actually visit Robert to this day at the Fort East Martello Museum in Key West, Florida. He's still dressed in his fetching little sailor suit, and he has a small stuffed toy companion that looks like a lion or maybe a dog, I don't know. It's called Leo, so I guess it's a lion. If you do go and visit him though, there are some rules that you absolutely must follow. Number 1, you must say hello to him when you enter his exhibit. Number 2, you must ask for his permission before taking his photo. And number 3, you must say thank you and goodbye when you leave. If you don't follow these rules, well, something terrible might just happen to you. There are so many apology letters that have been written to Robert by people who believe he's punishing them for not following his rules or for disrespecting him in some way. Here's an example of a letter. Dear Robert, I'm very sorry for not asking your permission to take your picture whilst visiting the museum last week. Since I've taken your picture without permission, many strange things have happened to me. While driving back from the Keys, a deer ran out in front of our car. We had to swerve to avoid hitting it and run off the road. We almost hit a tree. 2 days later, we had a small kitchen fire. Also, we've been hearing childlike giggles coming from our basement. Last night, I was home all alone. I heard a voice coming from the basement. When I went to investigate, I tripped and fell down the bottom 3 stairs. I got up to run out, but the door was locked. My husband said that I probably turned the lock myself without even thinking about it and locked myself in the basement. But honestly, Robert, we both know the truth. Please accept my deepest apology for taking your picture without asking. Also, please accept my daughter's apology for sticking out her tongue at you and making fun of you. The mystery of Robert the doll and all these strange occurrences surrounding him remains unsolved. There are loads of different theories though. Some suggest that the doll is possessed by an evil spirit. Others say that the doll was cursed by a servant who held a grudge against the Otto family. David Sloan, in a lovely little book that he's written about Robert, suggests that one of the family's servants, Emmeline Abbott, had a child who passed away and that child's spirit entered the doll. Another theory is that Gene poured so much love into this doll, so much of his energy, his emotion, both positive and negative, and that all of this is just stored in the doll, giving it life. Then again, maybe he really is just a normal doll, but because of all this lore that now surrounds him, people's imaginations run wild. Maybe all these bad things happening after disrespecting Robert are just purely coincidental. But I guess during hard times, it's nice to have an answer, something to blame, and Robert fits the bill quite nicely. Also, this belief that Robert did it offers hope that there's a way to stop these bad things from happening. All you have to do is write Robert an apology letter. Now, I don't know what to believe, but one thing's for sure. If I ever go and visit Robert, I will definitely be following his rules. If you got something from this video, Gagi and I would really appreciate it if you liked and subscribed. Stay safe, definitely do not disrespect Robert, and I hope you have a magnificent day.